So I was in the hospital room where my mother was sleeping, and I placed my hand over hers to be sure she was asleep before I whispered very quietly, "I'm sorry I wasn't the daughter you wanted." And those were the first words we had spoken to each other in about a decade, which wasn't too unusual given our history of missed communication over the years, over a lifetime. As a child, we didn't really share common interests to talk about. My interests were climbing trees and reading books. My mother's interest, as far as I could discern, was sewing matching Little House on the Prairie dresses for me and my little sister. And then I got to middle school, and everything changed. I watched my father die in a blink and you miss it kind of heart attack. My mother and I never, ever talked about it. I think we were both too busy just trying to figure out how to survive in this stupid new reality we found ourselves in. By the time I got to high school, who talks to their mother in high school? The upside of it, though, was that we didn't have the knockout, screaming, fighting matches that a lot of my friends had with their parents. If my mother was mad at me, she just stopped talking to me for days, sometimes weeks at a time. So by the time I got to college, we were really, truly disconnected. And I only went back home for Christmas because, of course, the dorms closed, so you got to go somewhere. You can't stay there. In retrospect, I can see how coming out to your parents on a Christmas break might be kind of a high-stakes proposition, but that's what I did. One Christmas, I went home, I sat her down, I said, "Mom, I'm a lesbian. I want you to know. Here's a book about it." And she said, nothing, of course. She stood up and walked down to her bedroom, and she sat there in her room in the dark, in the silence. And I went to my childhood bedroom for the very last time in my life, and I packed up my backpack and caught a bus back to Boston. I missed the next Christmas, but not long after that, I got a call from my sister who said, "I'm getting married. Will you be my bridesmaid?" I said, "Is there a Little House on the Prairie dress involved?" But there wasn't, so I said, "Okay." And so I found myself on another bus back up for the ritual fitting of the bridesmaid dresses. And my mother was the one surprisingly picking me up at the bus stop. You can imagine it was a very silent car ride until she broke the silence. "You know you have to wear a bra, right?" "Ma." "And shave your legs." Okay, so this was a long time ago before Reddit, but you all can tell me, was I the asshole for not shaving for the wedding? Thank you, thank you. That was well and truly it. That was the last time my mother and I spoke for more than a decade. Our lives went on. I met my partner. I married her. We became parents. And then I got a phone call from my aunt who said, "Your mother has a cancer that she probably won't survive." And I thought, if I knew I was going to die, I would want to know I had grandchildren. So I packed my family up and we drove up north. My mother was in a hospital for some testing. The room she was in was sort of a seafoam blue. It kind of matched the Jell-O that was left on her hospital tray. And I sent my family down the hall to wait. It was an awkward meeting, you can imagine. But I said, "You have grandchildren." And I pulled out 2 pictures that I'd brought with me. And I told her, "They're just down the hall if you want to meet them." And she looked at, but she didn't touch the pictures. And she just said, "No." And that's all I needed to hear. Packed up my family and drove back. Days and weeks and a couple of months went by, and occasionally my aunt would leave voicemails like, "It's getting closer to the end. This could be your last chance." And then, "We think she's holding on until you come back." And I thought, what on earth could she still need to hear from me? And then I thought I figured it out. So this time I drove back alone to a new hospital room. This one was sterile and white, and the lights were dim. It was the kind of room that's equipped for end-of-life care. And my mother was cocooned under a white blanket on the bed, sleeping. I sat beside the bed, and I put my hand over hers to make sure she was asleep before I leaned in and said so softly that maybe she would only hear it in a dream, "I'm sorry I wasn't the daughter you wanted." And she opened her eyes and said, "What?" And I said, "Nothing. Get some rest."